about that HR is willingly excluding the generational differences from the diversity and inclusion agenda. Those information, the studies of generational differences are the foundation of designing organizations, are the foundation to developing organizations, at the end, the foundation of creating organizational culture. Those are the information, those are the studies that support us to look at what are the relevant policies that we have, what are the policies that we need to get rid of, and what kind of policies we need to craft in order to cater for the generations. Those are the information that we require to review the entire system. Those are the information that are the foundations that we need to decide how do we recruit, how do we attract, how do we interview, how do we develop people, how do we exit people, how do they learn, and what kind of learning strategy we need to implement. And nobody is talking about it. And today is all about Gen Z. So give me a thumbs up if you are a Gen Z in here. So Gen Z is the age of 11 to 26-ish. No, nobody is a Gen Z. Are you guys? Give me a thumbs up if you are managing Gen Z and millennials, probably. So yes, thank you. We all manage Gen Z, we all manage millennials, right? Even if we are one of those, we all fall into one of these categories. And I heard increasingly difficult increasingly difficult conversation about these young generations, and we don't really know what to do with them. I'm so sorry to say that, but this is true. We had no idea what to do with these guys, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. So in case those of you who joined me first, I'm Sylvia. I'm an organizational psychologist, and I help organizations to create and design modern workplaces that are suitable for the younger generations, because this is the big task. And this is the task that is ahead of us, right? We cannot just keep the machine running as it was, as it used to be, because we need to prepare the workforce, whatever we do today, for the next generation, and we need to work with them together. So this tug of war of generations, impacting everybody. And there is no point of doing that. I have heard many times, my problem with Gen Z, my problem with them. We're not used to do that. So this kind of conversation is not taking us any further or not solving any problem. I know they are not easy, but the reason they are not easy is because we don't understand them. So let me give you a very quick story. Last week I was facilitating a workshop. And chefs are notoriously stubborn and old school. I'm a qualified pastry chef, I'm coming from the kitchen, so I can speak for them. Our culture is shouting at you, abusing you, we work 20 hours and you should be okay with that. And the new generation of chefs are coming into the kitchen and they no longer tolerate Gordon Ramsay's way of treatment. We grew up under that kind of regime, and we are okay with it, you can't abuse us because it just doesn't work. We grew immune to it. So we are having this conversation with the chef, and he said basically that he expects his chefs coming to the kitchen and work 18 hours, unpaid overtime, and, just put your head down kind of approach and do the job and go home. And I was listening to him and I told him, I'm like, chef, I completely get you, because, for me, that's how it worked. I'm like, but does that mean that, because he added that, this is how we used to do, and it made us very strong, very tough. I'm like, okay, that made us very tough, but we're still talking about that treatment. I still talk about when my head chef threw the knife at me, I'm like, is this really what we want? And then I realized that there is no point of going or having a debate with him, because his mindset is not supported by, or his mindset is supported by organizations, the culture, because your culture is what you reward and what you allow. And that's the problem. So, they want, and then I realized that they don't want anything to do with their employees. What they want is the robots, the copy-paste version of themselves. They don't want to deal with the human aspect of work. And, I cannot even blame them. And I explained it to them that historically speaking, work had very little human aspect to it, and this is how we grew up. But unfortunately, what we failed, all the managers, especially today, I want to talk about the mid-managers, the mid-management, right? Because they are the one who's stuck in between everybody. That we failed to acknowledge that and convey the message to them that, hey, lovelies, the generations are changing. In the past 10 years, the workplace has changed. And now your job is not only to get the job done, not only to complete tasks, get the money, achieve your KPIs, but the job is also, almost half of your job has now transitioned into you paying attention to your people. And your people will have emotions, your people will have personal issues, they will not tolerate you abuse them, whatever abuse means, right? And I know this is the gray line, and we can't even say anymore, because this is what the chef said, that I can't even give feedback anymore to the people because they get offended. I'm like, maybe they get offended the way you give the feedback, but not the feedback itself. So, people want to be treated very differently. And I think what we don't understand is what different means in the context of younger generation. But before we go into it, let me give you just a little bit of context and statistics over Gen Z, right? Because Gen Z is an interesting one. I absolutely love them. And Gen Z was raised by Gen X. And they were raised to be independent and figure things out by themselves. Many people say that Gen Z has experienced many changes and crises, but I don't buy that narrative, because if you look at history, every single generation had their own thing, right? So that's not the problem, that they have gone through changes. This is a false narrative, and I never fall into it. It's like saying that, Sylvia, you had no experience, but your grandmother had experience. Like, everybody has experiences. So Gen Z is really the age bracket of 11 to 26. So those 20, 18 and 26, those are the people in your organization who fall under Gen Z. Then you have the millennials. Let me just add them very quickly as well, because they are also very young and they are actively disengaged. So for me, if Gen Z is engaged, but millennials are actively disengaged. They are just so bored of life, these poor guys. And millennials are the one 27 to 42. Now it's plus minus a couple of years always, right? And why do we need to talk about this generational change? Thank you, Antonio. Generational change is because in 5 years, and listen to these guys, that's why we need to get the workforce ready, because we failed in the past 2 generations to do this. So now we're going to have to work extremely hard to do that. In the next 5 years, 75% of the workforce will consist of millennials. So you're going to have to work so hard to train your millennials how to deal with, how to manage and lead the younger generations. And 75% millennials, there will be the Gen Z, and by 2030, 11% of the workforce will consist of Gen Alpha. We don't even know what to do with Gen Alpha because they are very, very young, but they will also put a spin on everything. Now, so this is the context. And we completely forgot to explain that, and we skipped a few generations. And this is why I would like you guys to take away from today's session, to really understand why do we have a problem today. Because we skipped a few generations in terms of addressing the problems. Now, this is how it started. The current processes, the processes that we have today, they are built by boomers for boomers. And there is nothing wrong with it, okay? Then we went into Generation X, so this is my generation. Boomers and Generation X, we could put up with them because they were our mothers, right? So we were, okay, this is the way, all right. So they taught us to be, tough cookies, and we were completely ignored. So, Gen X has had the worst time probably, but we are very, very strong, apparently. And then, so Gen X put up with that. We didn't find it too difficult. But then we went into millennials, and millennials already started to struggle. Why do you think millennials are the least engaged demographic in the world of work? Millennials are the least engaged, and because the millennials already started to have problems with the boomers' policies and procedures and structures, right? But we didn't pay attention to it. We actually ignore the millennials. Nobody's talking about millennials if you pay attention, right? And so we needed a louder noise to hear that something was off. And then came Gen Z. And Gen Z turned the volume on, because now you have 2 generations of gap, right, in terms of the processes. So we designed something. So for example, your grandmother designed something, and I'm supposed to live by those rules if I am between the age of 11 to 26. Now, if you understand that gap, you understand that we have a problem. And you know what? We now understand that we have a problem. We're just not hearing the message. So just give me a thumbs up if it resonates with you, if it makes it easier to understand where the problem lies. That we have literally skipped a couple of generations, and they are not wanting to work based on our grandmother's structure. And we can call them, we can call them lazy, we can call them weak, we can call them whatever we want to call them, but this is fact. These are the facts. And coming back to the managers, and why is it so difficult, and why everybody's having a difficult time, no matter what generations? Because we forgot to explain to managers that how their job changed, right? And I put this on HR. I know everybody should be responsible for it, and we all are, right? But somebody, when it comes to people and the workforce and the structure and the policies and how we do things and the culture, it all apparently, HR is very quick to grab those kind of responsibilities, but everybody has abandoned those responsibilities. So I put this on HR simply because all people initiative and people welfare, it's at the end, it stops with HR. Now, managers will misbehave, but it doesn't mean that they can if we have a good HR team, right? So what has happened really, that managers are now today, they are put in a situation where they have to manage a generation between the age of 26 and even all the way to 35, or let's include millennials. There are used processes for your grandmother, and that's not going to work, right? Managers are used or stuck in the situation where they are looking up to their older managers. The older managers come with their old school mentality, right? But then they have the other side, they have to manage the younger generations. They don't understand because they don't even have anybody to guide them. HR would come into the picture and just simply say, look, and educate the workforce, but now we are going beyond educating the workforce. Look, the generations are changing. What does it mean to us in terms of people management? I never heard this conversation in organization, ever in my life. We had the wishy-washy, generational differences, Gen Z don't want to work, and that's it. And it's not the matter of they don't want to work, it's just they don't want to work on the terms and conditions that were designed in the 1960s. And so HR's role is really, what they skipped and what they didn't do is study the topic, right? Study what has changed in the world of work with each generation, what they want, and how can we adjust our processes and procedures and how we do things. So for example, and these are very simple things sometimes, but somebody needs to run with it. So for example, in the case of the chef who wants his workforce to work as hard as he used to do because that's the normal and it's okay to be shouted at me, and 12, 14, 16 hours a day shift, it's normal. So if HR understood that that's not how the current workforce work, they would dive in. Okay, so the current workforce will not tolerate that. This is why this chef, and I tell you, this chef has a massive turnover, This is why the kitchen team is losing employees, right? So what is it that I need to do here? And maybe, just maybe, coming to the conclusion that I will roll out, not even a policy, it's just literally following the labor law, right? I will not allow the chef, I will monitor attendance, and I will not allow anybody to get overtime. Now, there are days that we need to do overtime, and I understand that. But I even managed my overtime for my team of 50, 60 back in 2009. And I never had extra overtime. So, if we want to change the workforce, that must, and the mentality and the culture that is suitable for the newer generations, then it must come from HR. Because managers have been taught, and this is also a change in the mindset that is required, have been taught to get the job done no matter what. The task completion, achieving the result, the KPIs are more important than people. And it's not even the conversation which is important, more important, people or getting the revenue. That's not what we are talking about. But what we are talking about, that we cannot achieve or get the job done at all cost. Because guess what? Your high turnover rate will get you to bleed cash for that organization. So maybe the right reason or the right action is that for HR to step in and say, you know what, we don't do that. And the other thing that I was talking to this chef, and maybe this is another way that I can get you to maybe to look at it differently. People's context, how they were raised, their experiences, set the tone for the way you can interact with them, right? And this is where we make a massive mistake. We imagine that I can talk to you from one millennial or one Gen X to another Gen X in one way, and all of a sudden I want to apply the same for Gen Z. That's just not going to work, and that's not even inclusive. I love when HR always throws the inclusion agenda, but somehow they completely forgot to include generational differences into their busy agenda. But we are very quick to, run a report that we have 56 nationalities in one hotel. I'm like, okay, fantastic, but what do we do with that 56 nationalities? What do we do with that 4 generational differences? What do we do with that differences? How do we turn them into our benefit, our competitive advantage? We don't. We just see the problem with everything. We see the problem with diversity, and I'm not saying we don't have problems, but all we focus on the diverse, on the problems. And funny enough, HR does not acknowledge, if you look at, does not acknowledge the diversity in generation and the pros and cons. Nobody's talking about it. And, the first thing would be a good thing to start that, okay, what do they need? Because that's inclusion, right? What do disabled people need? That's inclusion. What do different nationalities need? That's inclusion. So why don't we do the same with generations and ask, what do they need? And let's do that, given the parameters and what we can do. So I'm not saying to change the whole organizations to one generation, but guess what? The gap between Gen Z's needs and what actually Gen X, for example, or even the boomers want are very similar. Because we used to work 20 hours, right? We could work all day. I can still work all day. But I also realized at this age that, I don't need to work that much. So I'm kind of leaning towards Gen Z's, let's just work 8 hours and let's get the hell out of here, because we can produce during 8 hours just as just as much work as if we were spending in the workplace 12 hours. Now, let's look at so just one more thing on, how you can interact with them. So their context, everybody's context sets the rules for interaction. So these are the guys that were raised, nobody ever shouted at them. And this is what I was explaining to the chef. I'm like, look, these guys, nobody ever shouted. They take their parents to court if the parents shout. I'm like, do you think they come into the workforce, they will allow you to shout at them? They turn around and they go. I was raised, my parents never shouted at me, but in school we got used to it. You shout at me, I just laugh in your face and I move on. And also these guys, they went to school and they got the 7th place trophy without any kind of performance. They were acknowledged. And now you want them to come into the workforce, work really, really hard and only be rewarded when they worked hard? That's not going to work. Now, I'm not saying you continue, because now we need to guide and coach them, right? So, hey, lovely, school is over, this is real life, and this is how we do things in here. And then how can we mediate in between? What works for you, what works for us? And this is what is missing. Now, how can we actually what is it that we could do to Gen Z and the younger generation and everybody, even millennials? I love to engage millennials into this conversation because they are also that type of, the mindset, and they are very paranoid. The millennials are overlooked, they are very, very quiet, they are very paranoid, and they are very scared, so they don't say anything. That's the problem with them. At least Gen Z is loud. So what is it that we need to change? And if you guys have any question, put your hands up. I'm more than happy to answer. What do we need to change? Well, everything. What doesn't work for Gen Z? So for example, let's say succession planning, because I was talking to somebody the other day. Oh, succession planning doesn't work. I'm like, it's not that it doesn't work. It doesn't work in a way that you used to run, because you used to run or plan succession planning for a workforce that stayed with you 3, 5, 10, 12, 15, 20, 40 years. Now that has changed. So if you know that your average tenure will be 1 year, 1.5, how should we do, that should be the question. How should we do succession planning? Because the question is not that it doesn't work, so we need to abandon the idea. Maybe it is, I don't know. Maybe it's just, it's no longer applicable because everything has changed. So we need to throw it out. We need to ask these questions. What do we need? And so if it's needed, succession planning, okay, how should we do, knowing that the longest tenure or the length of service is 1.5 years? And what is it that we should do? Is it dynamic? Is it to which position should we look at? Do we need to look at all the positions? So do we need to maybe look at the higher positions only that tend to stay much longer than the lower, and the lower is just going to be a train station? I have proposed to hotels, and they were, just to show you guys how inflexible we are, I proposed to hotels, because I run the internship program, right? I'm like, let's get interns, maybe 80% of the workforce for F&B and for front office. And I'm like, we turn them around every 6 months. They start, the new batch starts. It's a logistical nightmare, I know, but we can do it. The new batch starts 1 week before the old one goes, and they hand over and they train each other. And we just supervise and manage. Guess what? Oh no, it's too much hassle. So options are always there, but are we open to that? So that's succession planning. What else could we do in terms of, the workforce planning? Workforce planning is so important, because now you have a generation who is on the move, and there is nothing wrong with it. I actually like it. But have we thought about that, you have jobs in organizations where you don't need young people. Young people will have a lot of stamina. They want to be creative. They have energy. They have ideas. They want to be involved. And you have jobs that they don't require such a thing. And yet we hire Gen Z and a younger generation, regardless of the generation, right? Even just the person's characteristics. We hire people who want to do things, who want to make changes, who want to bring ideas forward, who have high energy, and they really would like to dedicate their time for the work and build a career. And then we put them in jobs that are just stagnant, that are just dead end. Why do I need, let me just ask this question. If you are in a service industry, for example, why do I need to have 20 years old sitting in call centers? Why don't I hire the older generations who are more stable, who are already done their career, they are retired A players, now they are B players, fantastic contributors, and they don't want to change. All they want is that paycheck and come and, you know, do the job. We can rely on them. Have we ever had this conversation that, hey, do I really need young people in every single position? Because I know what is coming with young people. It's a train station and I'm okay with it. But how can I leverage their talent, why they are here? How can I engage them? So workforce planning, we didn't think about Gen Z. So we chuck them into jobs that are so boring that they want to die half an hour into their first shift. We can do assigning them to creative projects. And we can also do, how they, in terms of their learning, we didn't even look at how they learn. Because if we actually looked at how the younger generation learn, we would throw out almost everything from our L&D. L&D would change drastically. We would look at organization very different in terms of learning and development because we would be having coaches. And that would be applicable for everyone, not just for Gen Z, because it's time to change the classroom and the workshop and all that. Now we need them from time to time, but what do we need to do with Gen Z? And so these are the problems that or areas that we need to look at in organizations. And I think this is where HR failed the entire workforce, because HR hasn't changed in the past 60 years. HR hasn't stepped in and said to the leadership team, the management, and constantly updating, that, hey guys, the generations are changing and we need constant update on our policies and procedures. But we don't do that. We want to run everything with the same tools, with the same training, with the same policies. Sometimes we sprinkle a little bit of well-being initiative on things, a little bit of inclusion initiative, but I just showed you a minute ago how inclusion agenda fails at first scrutiny. But nobody is willing to rip those walls out of this building and rebuild them, because this is what we need to do. So if you are working with organizations that are struggling in terms of their engagement, in terms of their productivity, their turnover rate, you will not, I tell you that right now, you will not solve the problem with trainings and engagement initiatives. The people are disengaged and they leave because of the old policies. It's literally opening a beautiful cupboard but finding skeleton. And the moment these employees are entering the workforce, especially the young ones, I'm not even talking about technology, because we kill these young generations with our Excel sheets, okay? But, even our policies, we cannot run. So ask your HR person. I don't know if you are in the position, whoever is listening. Ask your HR people, what are the policies that needs to stay? What are the ones that needs to go? And those that needs to stay, how do we need to alter that is suitable for the younger generation? Feedback is exactly the same. Gen Z hate feedback. But hard is not that we need to stop giving them feedback, but really asking them, how would you like to receive feedback? And sometimes it's that simple. And I was talking to the chef, and it was really interesting because I told him, because we were having a feedback session as well. And I asked, I'm like, chef, sometimes just you need to know these kind of things about your people, how they want to receive feedback. Because some people like to have it sugar-coated and nice. Some people like to have it straightforward like I do. And he said, I don't think I can do this in the service industry. We don't have time for this. And this is the problem, that mindset. And I told him, because of your mindset, the kind of mindset that you have, that's why people are leaving the service industry. Because we are convinced that we are right and we can't make changes. Like, I managed to do it for my staff. How do you want to receive feedback? Now, that did it mean that I always gave the feedback the same way. No, sometimes I run on tough love, you know, and sometimes come here, you're not doing it ever again. And that was it. So this is how we need to start looking at the workforce and start talking of generation, because the job that we have in front of us is not only to run organizations, but really to combine our wisdom with their new way of thinking and help these guys build the future of work the way they want it, right? These workplaces is theirs, not ours. So I think it only makes sense if we build it for them, together with them, and give them our practical experience and wisdom, because we are on our way out. So let's include them and let's look at them differently, not just like, oh, they are very difficult. They are difficult because we are speaking a very different language, and we are trying to manage them with 60 years old tools, processes and methods and leadership style. That's not going to work, and that's why they are difficult. Thank you so much, you guys, for joining me today. I hope it was helpful. If you need help with planning your Gen Zs or your workforce and making it modern, just drop me a message. But it's really a massive change that is needed in terms of organizations, and trainings are the last ones that we need to go to. Before that, we need to start rebuilding organizational structures and the way we look at things and the way we do things, because that's what is causing the problem for the new generations going forward, and for everybody who is working today. So thank you very much, and enjoy the weekend. Thank you, guys, and see you next week. I will bring you another fantastic topic, and stay happy and safe if you are in Dubai, and for all the rest, happy weekend. Thank you, guys.